If you underbuilt homes in a country for 5 years, you'd call it a mistake. If you do it for 10, it's a crisis. But 47, that's not incompetence, that's a design flaw. A system that rewards scarcity, delays, inertia, and turns land into leverage. If you're a property investor in New Zealand, you've been paid handsomely for that dysfunction. Shamubeel Eaqub, economist, author, and chief economist at Simplicity, joins us to answer their question on every investor's mind.
Financial freedom faster. Financial freedom faster.
If you like watching people make money, keep scrolling. But if you're the kind of person who wants the edge, the insight before the headlines, hit subscribe. Because in 2025, more New Zealand investors get their housing intel from this show than anywhere else on YouTube. The smart ones already know, and now you do too. Shamubeel, why has New Zealand underbuilt homes for nearly 5 decades, and who really benefits?
Well, essentially, when we dismantled all our economic kind of system in the 1980s, because we had so many problems that had been built up by drunk Uncle Muldoon, that we had to kind of make some pretty big changes. And one of the big changes we made was we kind of took away a lot of the support for the bottom end of the market. So around social housing, affordable housing, those supports around family capitalization, those kinds of things. And so what happened was that publicly driven part of the market, which used to provide housing for poor people and people at the bottom quartile, that just disappeared. And it's the same story that took place in the UK as well. And that's been the main reason. But it's also because we tightened up our planning regulations, we stopped investing in infrastructure. So it was just a combination of clusterfucks, really, that kind of came together to turn this into this current situation. But the encouraging thing is that we have recognized there is a problem. And across our two major political parties, we see a united vision of working together in similar vein to improve it.
Have they been patching up cracks, or are we actually starting to see structural shifts? Yes.
Oh, no, we are absolutely seeing a structural shift. So if you look at the current level of building concerns, which is the bottom of the recession, right? Things are pretty tough out in the economy right now. They're as high as they were before the GFC. So if the bottom of the cycle is as good as it was before the GFC, something has changed in New Zealand. We need to, but I think we're in a fundamentally better position because our planning rules are heaps better than they have been. And they're still getting better in the months and years to come.
How have the planning laws, the zoning, the council bottlenecks, how have they locked up this investor opportunity?
Well, I mean, okay, so there's two things, right? So one was around when there is a very constrained market, investors get the benefit of the constraint, the shortage, right? You get the uplift in land values, you get the uplift in rent values. When you get the opening up the rules, when you've got more supply, the investment opportunities are more around the increased typologies of housing that's available. So, for example, over half of the new houses that are being built in Auckland right now are medium density. And that means that the cost of buying a new home is so different than it used to be. So we've got a lot more typologies that are coming in. There are more choices, more variety. So it becomes a much richer market. So there is a lot more, I think, creativity and a lot more active decisions that investors make. So it's not just buy any old house and rent it out and you're going to get rich. I think you have to be much more focused around, is it in the right location? Can I maximize my occupancy? Can I maximize my returns? I think it's a much more formal decision-making process now, like a business, rather than it's just a one-way bet.
How do you balance, I know you talk about housing as a right, and the quality of properties being provided to people, the health and the well-being side of things, given that that does add to the cost, with the fact that a lot of people can't afford it. And if we want more properties, making them cheaper would mean we get more of them.
Yeah, and I think this is the reason why we have subsidies, right? So there are costs, and that's why the subsidies help you kind of offset some of those costs. But you can't constantly just give subsidies because it becomes unaffordable. What we have seen is over the course of the last 10 years, the quality of our rental properties have improved massively as a result of these changes in rules, right? And yes, you're absolutely right, they've come with costs, but we've also saved a lot of money in terms of people not going to the hospital and those other bits and pieces. So the savings are in different places than where the costs are. So you're absolutely right that there are some costs, but I think as society, we have to make some of these trade-offs and go, what's worth the investment? Like, would we rather have sick kids going to hospital with rheumatic fever, or should we fix some of these things and still cost us $4 billion in subsidies? Maybe that $4 billion is worth it, or whatever it is. So I absolutely hear you. And so I think it's about finding the balance. It's always about trade-offs. How do we find the right amount of trade-offs to get this right? So the way I think about it is, when we're doing these policy reforms, how do we make sure that the way we build houses, the quality of the houses are improving at the same time, but having that trade-off, not always just going for the gold standard, but going for that's good enough. So the idea of progressivity, right? So we want to improve gradually over time as we make these changes, rather than trying to fix everything in one go, because that doesn't work.
What regions are most exposed to the chronic underbuilding, and where do you see opportunity?
So the chronic underbuilding is very much in the provinces. So what has been unusual in the last decade is the provinces have been growing really fast in terms of population. So I don't know if you know, I'm very infamous in Wanganui. I called it a zombie town, I don't know, 2015 or something. And you know what? Just to spite me, that was the last year that population was stagnant. Ever since I called it a zombie town, the place has been growing like gangbusters. So, talk about dose of humility, right? But so in all those kinds of places, what we have seen in the last decade is this extraordinary amount of population growth. And these places simply cannot keep up with the population growth because they're not used to building houses. They don't have the infrastructure. So some really big pressures there. So I'd say the opportunities are very much in the provinces, but be careful, because if you look at 20, 30 years, the aging population pressures might still be there. So it's a very much a calculated risk, and you need to make sure you have an off-ramp.
Are the subsidies overrepresented in the regions, the provinces as well, though? Like, are we just propping up regions that don't have the economic activity? We give them money, their population grows, but there's no real economy in that area.
Well, it's not quite true, because, the provinces do have quite well-functioning economies. They're just smaller and different. So it's quite different in terms of what happens in those places. So I don't actually have anything against provincial New Zealand. I quite enjoy going to provincial New Zealand because they offer a different lifestyle that's suitable for some people. They're not for everyone. So when I called Wanganui a zombie town, it wasn't because I hate Wanganui. In fact, I quite enjoy going to Wanganui. Less so these days because it's a little bit, I feel less welcome these days. But the reality is that it's a beautiful town. It was probably just too big for its infrastructure, right? It had a central town that was too big for the number of people who were there. But as it grows, there's actually a lot of amenities and a lot of other things that are going on. It's more about just making sure in these provincial places is, are we there for the right reasons? Do you have a competitive advantage? Do you have good jobs? Do you have a quality of life that justifies living there? And for a lot of places in New Zealand, that absolutely does.
Does the rise of simplicity living represent a bit of a blueprint for breaking this supply gridlock?
Yeah, look, what Shane Brealey and Anna Brealey have done with Simplicity Living is pretty inspirational. They've kind of taken the way that we build houses and they've almost kind of made it a factory process on site. And they're building at much lower cost than the competitors, the market. And, the houses they're building is pretty cool. So it's pretty inspirational stuff. And what's really beautiful is all the IP is free for anybody to replicate it. So my offer to anybody who's looking at building or is in the building industry, come and have a look at our productivity hub. If you want help to implement it in your place, we will help you. We want New Zealand businesses and New Zealand builders to build differently, build better, because we want you to make more money and we want to have better homes for New Zealanders.
And how's immigration and population growth going to pressure the system over the next decade?
Yeah, so population growth is one of those really big things for New Zealand. So if you think about that underbuild that we've had in the last 50 years, that has been both because of we didn't build enough houses and because we've had population growth that was high and unpredictable. And that unpredictability is mainly from immigration, because it sort of goes from really high to really low. And those wild swings mean that our building sector also faces these wild swings. We lose too much capacity and capability, and so we're not able to build through the cycle. And so with immigration policy, I think we really need to have a rethink in New Zealand. It's not just about the number of people who come to New Zealand, but how do we make that inflow of people who come into New Zealand more predictable, so that our ability to invest in the infrastructure, in housing, in health, education, all those things can keep up. At the moment, it's completely uncoordinated. And I think New Zealanders are really losing patience with immigration as an economic policy.
And what advice will you give to investors planning on building or developing in the next 5 years?
So I think if you're developing in the next 5 years, get in early. This is probably the best possible time to get started because we're at the tail end of the recession. The builders are desperate to get jobs. You're going to get a good price and you're going to get crews on deck. If you're thinking further out over the next few years, I think it's all about location, location, location. You want to be in close proximity to transport and you want to have places that people are absolutely want to live in. Because the reality is that we are going to have more housing that will be built over the course of the coming decades. And you want to make sure that your building and your assets are in the most prime and premium position possible.
Well, thanks for your insights today, Shamubeel, and we will catch up again soon. Appreciate the stuff that you're putting out on the Simplicity channel, and keep fighting the good fight, man.
Thanks for having me, mate.
This channel's growing faster than your equity. Too blunt? No, just honest. You think your portfolio is solid? Then imagine what it looks like with an edge. Information isn't power, action is. Subscribe and get dangerous, or keep playing it safe while others don't.